So I've been reading this book by Jason Burke, Al-Qaeda, The True Story of Radical Islam. And there's an interesting topic that gets brought up about the origins of radical Islam. He doesn't explicitly state this, but he basically provides like a thesis as to why an ideology becomes radical. And it's basically that there's the presence of like a legitimate or like perceived as legitimate threat to a group of people. And in addition to that, there has to be like a disenfranchised group of people as well. So it's the perceived threat, but I think also the disenfranchisement of people. And the reason why I think it's like an implied thesis is because he kind of states that Islam became radicalized, or at least there was radicalized Islam. If you go back to like 1857, there starts to become a bunch of primary sources that encourage fighting foreigners or fighting colonial powers. And a lot of these writers were in regions where there was external influence. So it was, whether it's the British in Afghanistan, or even the Soviets in Afghanistan, or even the British cutting up different parts of like Asia, you could say, in general. A lot of these writers, or these primary sources, kind of were addressing some of those colonial influences. And I thought about this a little bit further, and it does kind of make sense because when the Soviet invasion happened in Afghanistan, it pushed a lot of people in towards the Pakistan region, and there was a lot of primary sources that were being spread around in, say, the Pashtun areas that were kind of advocating for fighting against Russians or British, and it was documented since the first one was since 1857, but there were other authors that followed up from then, being in those regions as well. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it in terms of, let's say, the original Ukrainians fighting the Russians when they started, I think, launching attacks across the Black Sea in Russia. And there was primary sources arguing that they should do that, and they were an oppressed people. The same thing happens with even Buddhists. The only time I can think of a Buddhist engaging in semi-aggressive or radical behavior was in response to occupation or oppression from a larger group. You could think about Christians as well. The times where I see Christian radicalism being the most prominent were when they were being occupied by Normans, or when there was illegitimate threats that they had to fight outside of the Christian nations. It seems to me to be the case that there has to be some kind of perceived threat and a dissatisfied group of people or disfranchised group of people. And on top of that, I also, in order to, I think, go further with this, in order for de-radicalization to happen, I think there has to be a time of stability, because it seems to be that liberalization, we'll call it the process liberalization, or we're like coming to a more harmonious agreement amongst your citizens, fellow citizens, requires conversations that can't get resolved in a 1 or 2 or 3 year period. They kind of need to be happening for a 10-year period. So I'm thinking immediately of like, if Iran was attacked now, and at the same time the whole thing about the hijab and women showing their hair happened now, the women would have been ignored. They wouldn't have gotten as much international attention because there's more pressing issues, right? There's bombs being dropped in the country. There's more pressing issues. The same thing happens with gay marriage in America. If gay marriage was being pushed through while there were wars going on, I feel like it would have been an issue that was sidelined. Like if they were being actively bombed by Germany or something like this, the issue would have been sidelined. And so I think in order for these kind of, let's say, like, I want to say liberal, but I just mean like equitable worldviews to come into existence, there has to be like a time of stability and peace. And that's not what happened or is happening for many Muslim countries. Many Muslim countries aren't experiencing stability or peace. And so I think there's some truth to the kind of thesis he's making in the background of this book, and that its origins actually stems from colonial or foreign influence into these regions. I mean, the saying goes like, the problem with America's foreign policy in Afghanistan was you drop a 2,000-ton bomb claiming to win hearts and minds, and then you kill someone's cousin, and then that person joins the fight against America, right? I haven't come to a definite conclusion on this topic. I know like the counter argument is that the issue is with the religion itself, but there are tons of like things inside Christianity, inside Islam that are less than savory. And I don't see it being the religion itself, especially in the case of Christians, because Christians did become peaceful, and Christians used to be the most violent group of people. If you look at the number of wars fought between groups, I believe Christians killed each other the most by a lot, but they became pretty peaceful due to prosperity. And that prosperity, I mean, in part, they were on a lot of resources that were important, but in addition to this, they got stabilized a lot quicker as well, whereas Muslim countries haven't had as much stability. And I think even in the case of Russia now, where there's instability, I believe the church has been utilized by those in power for political purposes, encouraging, looking down on the Ukrainian Orthodox father. I believe something like this. My mind's not made up on this topic, but this is kind of where I'm floating around. I would like to look at, like, for example, if I could find the primary sources published in each religion, and then look at whether there was a destabilizing event that occurred at the same time, and try and correlate those two. That could be an interesting research project. But if you have something to add to this, I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. And bye-bye for now.